Good evening and welcome to this week's edition of Roundtable Talk. This evening we have our special guest, Prime Minister Dr. Gonsalves. You have not been around for quite a while. You have not sat at the round table. But here you are today and so much things are happening. You've been running ragged, traveling quite a bit as well. But of course all eyes are focused on tomorrow's historic meeting, which you have brokered and are facilitating between the presidents of Venezuela and Guyana in reference to the border dispute that is currently being displayed, more or less. How did we get here, Prime Minister?
Well, thank you first of all, Teresa, and good evening to all our viewers. I begin first of all by making one particular correction. Small in words, but it may have significance. We are not facilitating a high-level dialogue on the border dispute between Guyana and Venezuela. We are facilitating a high-level dialogue on the matters consequential to the border controversy. And it is framed in that way in order to accommodate the different perspectives of the governments of Guyana and Venezuela. As you know, they have different views as to the existing situation and how to proceed towards a possible resolution. So the way in which we have framed it is for a discussion to take place on face-to-face between President Ofanali of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana and President Nicolas Maduro of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela on matters consequential to the border controversy. We have gotten here to this point of having this conversation facilitated by the pro tempore presidency of the Community of States of Latin America and the Caribbean. St. Vincent and the Grenadines is the pro tempore president of a CELAC to which both Venezuela and Guyana belong. And in this effort, in this facilitation, we are supported by the Caribbean community, which is currently led by the Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of Dominica, the Honourable Roosevelt Skerritt. And in this effort, we are being supported by His Excellency Celso Amorim, AMORIMCELSO, very distinguished diplomat and personal envoy of President Lula of the Federated Republic of Brazil. President Lula has been helpful in giving support to the efforts by St. Vincent and the Grenadines to have this conversation. And this high-level dialogue is also supported by the Office of the Secretary General of the United Nations, my friend Antonio Guterres, who is sending his chef de cabinet, a very experienced diplomat to a Jamaican who was once permanent representative of the government of Jamaica to the United Nations. He's the chief of the cabinet secretary, so to speak, of Antonio Guterres, Mr. Courtney Rattray, and Ambassador Rattray is RATTRAY, he's being supported by the Assistant Secretary General of the Department of political and peace-building affairs. So we are facilitating St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and others are playing important roles and have played important roles for us to get to this juncture. And tomorrow, St. Vincent and the Grenadines and the Prime Minister of Dominica, we would be interlocutors along with our dear brother from Brazil, Ambassador Amorim. The United Nations representatives are there as observers. Of course, the presidents may wish to have any other interlocutor from among the CARICOM region, or for that matter, in Latin America. We have coming in also a representative of the president of Honduras. Honduras is the next pro tempore president of CELAC. I also informed, though they are not being represented, the government of Cuba, which had supported our facilitation, and we have informed the government of Argentina, because Argentina is the preceding pro tempore president of CELAC. My own personal efforts in quote-unquote brokering this meeting, to use the verb that you use, started around September 29th. There was a meeting between some Caribbean heads of government and the Vice President of Venezuela, Delcy Rodriguez, and the Foreign Minister of Venezuela. Meeting which took place in Grenada on the margins of a regional gathering on climate change, a preparatory meeting towards COP28, which just has concluded in Dubai, in the United Arab Emirates. And a few weeks ago, it looked as though I had a tentative agreement and a tentative date, but that didn't come about because of the fragility of the circumstances. As you know, there was a lot of to and fro and words from out of Georgetown and Caracas, which I suspect hurt this or that side when they were being hurled. But part of my own concern is that the controversy which arose from the extant problems between Guyana and Venezuela. This is something which, this contemporary manifestation, something which had been simmering for a very long time, and indeed is a challenge, a difficulty, and I'm using various euphemisms, over 100 years old. And experience teaches that when we have disputes between nations or controversies between nations, that when you're talking, it is less likely that there would be an escalation into open conflict and threats of use of force or the actual use of force. And it is so easy when you're escalating the problems and you're doing it with words and some actions, that it can get easily out of hand. And within that context, you can even have agents provocateurs who have no interest really in peace, that they may do things which may cause inadvertently open conflict and use of force. And if that were to happen in the case of Venezuela and Guyana, the consequences are horrendous to contemplate, because there are other actors which will get involved. And other actors in our hemisphere who will get involved. When I say actors, I mean state actors may likely to get involved. And then you have a lot of people dying. You have refugees fleeing. You have destabilization. And you may have some historic reversals which would affect this Caribbean region, which is a zone of peace, and Latin America for at least a generation to come. And in the process, a lot of innocent people would lose their lives. And that kind of a conflict, open conflict, would affect the villages, the distant villages in countries in the Caribbean and Latin America. The Ukraine war is affecting us immediately through rising prices and disruptions of supply chains and difficulties to get goods and services at reasonable prices. Like you have an escalation in the price of oil, for example. Now, it is easier. A lot of people don't realize this. It is easier when you have tensions for it to break out in open conflict and use of force than it is to have peace. And let's face it, Venezuela and Guyana are neighbors. None of them is going to be lifted up and taken to Vladivostok. They are where they are. And as I had posed the questions earlier to various persons who have interest in this matter, after a likely victory of Guyana at the International Court of Justice, and I could explain why I say likely victory of the Guyana at the International Court of Justice. After that, what? After the victory in the referendum in Venezuela for the government, which posed the 5 questions in the referendum. After that, what?
You spoke of tomorrow's dialogue being about matters consequential to the border controversy.
Yes.
What are some of those matters of which you speak?
Well, first of all, it is important for us to reiterate, for the parties to reiterate certain fundamentals which are consequential to and arise from this controversy. First of all, that it must be settled peacefully. It must be done in accordance with international law. that we must not do anything which would subvert peaceful coexistence and the unity of the Caribbean and Latin America. That we must avoid the threat of war, the threat of violence, of force, or the actual use of force. We must seek to set up certain modalities to have an ongoing conversation about a number of practical questions. Guyana and Venezuela are interested in the maintenance of the region as a zone of peace, of working for sustainable development of their countries, of ensuring that fundamental precepts of the Charter of the United Nations are actually observed: non-interference, non-intervention in the internal affairs of another country, respect for territorial integrity. All of these matters touch upon and are consequential to the border controversy and the setting up of modalities for further conversations. For example, as a purely practical matter, the decision of the International Court of Justice regarding certain conservatory measures, certain provisional measures, until a final determination. Can there be a respect for those? While the countries set up modalities to deal with consequences to a determination sometime by the middle of next year, to the claim which Guyana has put before the International Court of Justice, which deals with land. What about the maritime areas which are to be delimited? So you see that there are huge issues to be considered. Now, this is without prejudice to Guyana insisting, and I understand this fully, that the matter which they have before the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, that should be proceeded with. Venezuela said, well, we don't support the jurisdiction of the ICJ on this. We want to function under the 1966 Geneva Agreement. Guyana's response is that under that agreement, the good offices discussions which took place through the office of the Secretary General of the United Nations, that those good offices have been exhausted, and that is why the Secretary General had referred the matter to the International Court of Justice. You see all the different dimensions and complications, and it's without prejudice to what Guyana is insisting on its claim and what Venezuela is insisting otherwise, that there should be a different modality. Now, you may say, well, Ralph, there are going to be real challenges because Venezuela is not participating in the ICJ, International Court of Justice. Its referendum enjoins its government not to participate in the ICJ. But the National Assembly of Guyana has a 65-0 vote, which enjoins the President of Guyana not to talk to the Venezuela government about the matter which is before the ICJ. So what that's why we have to address matters consequential to the controversy. And as I said in my letter to both Fanali and Nicolas Maduro, that you require the wisdom of Solomon, the patience of Job, and the foresight of the ancient prophets, and that being a leader in these circumstances, particularly those who are in the maelstrom, is a strenuous matter, but it is preferable for you to have a strenuous life in pursuit of peace rather than to have a life of ignoble ease in the engendering of conflict, perpetual conflict, and even a violent endeavor.
Against all that background, would you say that you are between, or we are between a rock and a hard place? You'll answer that after we come back from this first break. We'll be back in just a moment.
You can increase your chances of winning the Super 6 jackpot with a combo play. Remember, Super 6 numbers are from 1 to 28. Choose any 5 Super 6 numbers. That's a combo 5 for $69. Match any 5 of the 6 numbers and you will win the jackpot. Choose 7 Super 6 numbers for $21. Match any 6 of the 7 numbers and win the jackpot. There's more. Combo 8, where you purchase 8 Super 6 numbers for $84. Match any 6 of the 8 numbers and you will win the jackpot. There are also Combo 3 and Combo 4 Super 6 plays. Visit the NLA headquarters in Pauls Avenue or WhatsApp 495-6886 for more details. Super 6, bigger jackpots, more chances to win.
Welcome back. You have given a vast explanation and background to what really is happening. What are some of the consequential matters? Would you say that we are somewhere between a rock and a hard place? Guyana has its own position, Venezuela has its own position. You are smack in the middle as friends of both nations. You have also been very careful to indicate that you are not a mediator in this entire process.
Absolutely correct. I'm not a mediator. St. Vincent and Grenadines is a facilitator and an interlocutor. An interlocutor, that means that we are among those who are talking, who are having a conversation on this, and to see how we can guide. And naturally, in my role tomorrow, in the discussions, is for me to help and nudge it here or there, and to see whether it is possible to keep the conversation going. This is not to use the cricketing analogy, this is not a T20 international, it's not a one-day international.
It's not a test match?
It's a test series, not just a test match.
Series, there you go.
Home and away. Except in this case, it appears as though both the governments of Guyana and Venezuela would prefer to play both the home and away matches in St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
On neutral ground.
And with an umpire whom they trust, they have respect for, and whom they believe is sufficiently seized of an understanding of the issue to aid a conversation, and for it not to, the circumstances not to deteriorate into open conflict or the use of force or the threat of force. You will notice that since we announced these talks, and both St. Vincent and the Grenadines, in his capacity as pro tempore president of CELAC, and CARICOM through its chairman, Roosevelt Skerritt, and other leaders in the region, including leaders such as Lula, the president of Mexico, and others, who are urging that we have a discussion so that we can de-escalate the conflict. As I go back to the original premise, the original starting point, what the history of humanity has taught us in terms of speaking in some structured way. Remember, the presidents of Venezuela and Guyana are not inside of a parliament where you're talking every week or every month, where you can trash out your things. These are two independent countries where each leader had been speaking across the borders and on the airways and all the modern communications media to each other, to their respective populations, and to the world. And sometimes, oftentimes, the rhetoric has been very difficult and harsh. But since we have announced this meeting, you will notice that even though you have is taken out of positions in letters to me, both by President Maduro and by President Ali, that the extent of the rhetoric has subsided somewhat. We'll take, for example, on Monday there was to be a resolution at the Organization of American States in Washington. And I asked those who are engaged in this to postpone this resolution, because if you had, Venezuela is not a member anymore of the Organization of American States, but you would have had a lot of tough rhetoric coming out from that august body. And you could have had, and you would have had, very sharp responses from the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. Could you imagine that you had such discussions on Monday and you have harsh responses on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and you were supposed to talk on Thursday? You probably would not have survived to have the conversation on Thursday.
Not preempting you.
So you see the value I'm talking about, yes, about simply having a structured, ongoing conversation and to address some matters consequential to the border controversy.
What are your expectations with regard to this conversation?
My expectations are that we will continue to talk and to see if we can have even bits of advance, and to see if we have no deterioration or setbacks. But in this process, you are likely to have setbacks and advances, and wherever there's a setback, together we seek to turn that setback into an advance in the interest of peace and respect for international law. Look, Venezuela and Guyana belong to the Amazon Cooperation Treaty. They're 2 of 8 countries. The Amazon, that's the lungs of the world in absorbing carbon dioxide to make the planet in which we live is the largest tropical forest. That's an important question for them to be talking about. The issues of sustainable development for their own countries and for the region. Those are matters to talk about. And I remind everybody that this is a matter which had been going on, a problem which has existed for over 100 years. There was an arbitral award in 1899, which gave the territory, which demarcated the territory to what was then British Guyana. Venezuela contests that arbitral award. And I have heard the basis of their contestation, but that has not been put before a tribunal of law to be tested to see whether, in fact, that evidence which you may have is cogent and compelling and rises to a level to vitiate that award. There's a 1966 agreement just before Guyana became independent between Britain and and Venezuela to be talking on the issue without a subversion of the 1899 arbitral award. And that's the view that Guyana has. Venezuela says that this 1966 agreement raises the matter that the 1899 award, there was something wrong with it. Guyana has a different interpretation. I have read it and I have my own view. And St. Vincent and the Grenadines, like other CARICOM countries, historically have been taking a position in relation to the inviolability of the borders, which had been effectively administered by the respective countries. What is administered by Guyana and what is administered by Venezuela. But in my position of interlocutor, I am just there to help for us to avoid the worst possible scenario. It is a line to walk which is difficult. But I remind everyone, this has been going on for over 100 years. And before the 1899 arbitral award, there were decades of dispute which arrived at the position of that award. And there's a history which each side can recount between 1899 and now, or even before 1899. And each side will go to particular quote-unquote facts. And as I say, as a student of the history of this problem, and reading about it and studying it and listening to the respective leaders and professionals, I have my own view. But it is in the complicated world that we will have to find a way, why, without prejudice to any of our existing positions. And I'm talking about the particular principal participants in this conversation, Venezuela and Guyana, without prejudice to their positions, that there are many other things that they can talk about consequential to the controversy. And I come back to that. You notice I'm presenting it in a careful, nuanced manner, because the alternative, when other actors, state actors could be involved, the alternative could be dire.
Okay, we'll take a break, and when we come back, you'll tell us about what to expect tomorrow's meeting, and how are preparations going so far for the hosting of tomorrow's meeting. Back in just a moment.
Thinking of winning the lotto jackpot? Well, there is an easy way. Combo Play. Choose 4 numbers from 1 to 36. That's a combo 4 at a cost of $64. Match any 4 of the 5 numbers and win the lotto jackpot. There's Combo 6, where you purchase 6 numbers for only $12. Match any 5 of the 6 lotto numbers and hit the jackpot. How about Combo 7? That's a purchase of 7 lotto numbers for $42. Match any 5 of the 7 numbers and you will win the jackpot. There are also Combo 3, Combo 8, and Combo 9 lotto plays. Visit the NLA headquarters in Pauls Avenue or WhatsApp 495-6886 for more details. Lotto, you have to be in it to win it.
Welcome back. So, Prime Minister, how are plans going for tomorrow's meeting? Where are we? And what can we expect?
Well, the public service of St. Vincent and the Grenadines has responded magnificently to the political leadership. And to get this going, all the ministries relevant to this exercise are involved across the government, from the police to the office of the Prime Minister to the Ministry of Tourism, Immigration, Customs, Argyle International Airport, all of the entities, VINLEC, private sector agencies such as FLO and Digicel. You can just imagine the details. People involved in catering and the Ministry of Health involved. You have to have ambulances around. You have to have the facility at the Kingston Medical Hospital, the Milton Cato Memorial Hospital, something available. A couple of rooms there, well equipped, just in case anything happens to anyone. The polyclinic at Stubbs, which is nearby. Just the number of details to be dealt with are just innumerable. But from all the reports, and I have sat into with some of these meetings to provide guidance, and the public servants are responding well. There's a committee which we have put together under the leadership of the Cabinet Secretary. And as this moment as I'm talking, they're working feverishly because people have come in, some people have come in already, some advanced parties from both Venezuela and Guyana, and then there's some one or two delegations, I've been advised, have arrived. So the preparations are going well. I mean, you can just think about the transportation arrangements. Some people are staying over from tonight, some are coming in tomorrow, but even then they're coming in tomorrow. You have to make rooms available in hotels and so on. It's a monumental number of details and the time frame, everything together. So it's but we have been doing pretty okay. I would say that all the challenges, all the difficulties have been successfully met. And in a sense, it's a good dry run for those who are involved. For when we have the 33 heads of state and government or their respective delegations here at the end of February next year for the summit of the Community of States of Latin America and the Caribbean, when we pass over the pro tempore presidency to our sister nation, Honduras, with which great country we have a bond through the Garifuna, for example, apart from being in the same geographic area. I'm hoping that all of this discussion we are talking about, all the issues we are talking about here, will pique the interest of the students who are doing history, who are doing social studies, who are doing geography, so that they can understand their neighborhood much better. The truth is this, that St. Vincent and the Grenadines' foreign policy and the way we have functioned in our interaction with the world, including our neighbors in CARICOM and Central America and Latin America, that we have arisen at a point where we can do something like this. I mean, the world is looking at St. Vincent and the Grenadines at the moment. The requests from media houses, for instance, regionally and internationally, it's intense. And other governments, I mean, governments of the United States and Britain have been in communication with us. For example, the new recently appointed Foreign Secretary in the United Kingdom, Dave Cameron, whom I know pretty well. He's now Lord Cameron in his new job as Foreign Secretary. Members of the British government have been in touch with us. The regional security system is also involved, because I got them involved to help to provide guidance and support to the security arrangements which we are making for this important high-level dialogue. And I am sure that Vincentians of all walks of life will accommodate what we are doing, and if there is any minor inconvenience here or there, that they will appreciate that it is for a greater good, that is to say peace in our hemisphere, in our region.
I know you say that it's a conversation that has to continue. It can't just be one round of conversation, but it's something that has to continue. But how confident are you about a favorable outcome of tomorrow's meeting, and what, after all, the talking?
Well, first of all, The talking, as I've indicated, is important. Because, as the old saying, that if you Jaw, Jaw, you're unlikely to war, war. So that itself is progress. And I say all that is really without prejudice to whatever positions each government has and the different modalities which they're pursuing in quest of a resolution. I am satisfied that the leadership, the political leaderships in Venezuela and in Guyana are sufficiently mature and wise and respectful of each other, and have a sufficiency of patience and calm to proceed in a manner which would not escalate this conflict. I mean, there are people who say to me, well, President Maduro will undoubtedly raise the question of the claim of Guyana before the International Court of Justice. And the President of Guyana may well say, well, Mr. President Nicholas, you want to talk about that, come to the ICJ. Put in your counter memorials. But if you want me to talk about that here, that's not a conversation which I'm having here. That may be a response. You may just listen in silence to that on the other hand and say, well, the issues which I would wish to talk about are the following. I've told people, if you have studied the way in which length of time disputes, some important disputes have length of time and the involvement and some of the arcane details which you have to endure. You look at the discussions in Paris to bring about the end of the Vietnam War. The discussion began in the early 1970s. Even the shape of the table and the seating arrangements that took a long time to be resolved, weeks upon weeks. But they got there. Of course, no two disputes are the same, and I'm not comparing what was this horrendous conflict in Vietnam with what is taking place here at the border between Guyana and Venezuela. I'm just talking about problems between states historically have required, as I have said, the proverbial wisdom of Job, the proverbial wisdom of Solomon, the patience of Job, and the foresight of ancient prophets. Because the alternative is horrendous. And I know people are saying, when I speak like this, they said, Ralph, but if this or that of the parties or some external actor does something which involves force, I said, then you will see what we are trying to avoid. So if you think the situation is difficult and bad now, look at what is possible, indeed probable, to happen, and I'm in my mind, all the interconnections I'm thinking in a large strategic sense.
Let's talk about some of those when we come back.
Yes.
Taking our final break, and then when we come
Sure.
back, we'll talk about that. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back. Prime Minister, you were talking before we took our last break about some of the probabilities, some of the things that could happen. Well, you didn't expound on them, but you were hinting that the actions could be horrendous if things were to go south, as we say.
Now, American companies are involved in oil exploration in Guyana. Not only American companies, but there are American companies. Of course, American companies are also involved in exploration in Venezuela. But Guyana militarily is no match for Venezuela's military. Guyana is doing training exercises, and they are having conversations with the U.S. authorities. If American property or lives somehow become compromised, it doesn't require any imagination as to the possibility that an external actor, state actor, could easily get involved. Now we have enough of that in the world already. And once open conflict breaks out and external actors are involved, the end game, you don't know. This is a matter which has certain potential consequences which could be dire. I repeat myself on that. And leaders in the region have a view which is not dissimilar. I think that Lula is getting involved, or the Office of the Secretary General of the United Nations, or we are having coming to St. Vincent here the Prime Minister of the Bahamas, the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, the Prime Minister of Barbados, the Prime Minister of Grenada, of St. Lucia, the Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of Dominica, that the government of St. Vincent and Grenadines is facilitating and acting as an interlocutor. What? You think because we don't have other things to do? And this is really what we are doing here is a triumph for regional diplomacy. I don't know if you have seen a letter written by Sir Dennis Byron.
I have a copy with me.
And
yes.
A letter he has written to me, and Sir Dennis speaks to this question of the importance of diplomacy and to be in quest of peace. So Dennis, and he has made certain suggestions for ongoing diplomatic work to deal with ongoing challenges. Is president of the Caribbean Court of Justice. He was the head of the quote-unquote War Crimes Tribunal in relation to Rwanda. That tribunal was held in Tanzania. Now, this is a man who has seen and who has appreciated conflict. And for him to sit down to write a letter like that to me, are we, those who speak flippantly, similarly, Sir Hilary Beckles, has spoken to me on this matter, and he's spoken about it publicly. I've been receiving innumerable telephone calls and text messages and emails of support from distinguished people and leaders all across the world. You see public statements made by the government of India. India has a very sophisticated foreign policy bureaucracy. You see what the foreign minister is saying about this. Countries in Africa, in Asia, out of Europe and North America. It's all of these countries and distinguished leaders in different walks of life. Are they all wrong? There are people who are interested in risking greater conflict, and some of them are even opportunistic in doing so. In one particular place, I've been advised that some forces are raking up every photograph they can find on the internet with Ralph and Maduro. They're putting them up. The suggestion is that Ralph is favorable to Maduro. They wouldn't go and see the innumerable photographs which are on the internet with Ralph and Barrett Jagdeo, the former president of Guyana, now vice president, or with my friend Orphan Ali. You'll find people, that old story where all the countries in the OECS who got debt relief under Petrocaribe from the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, they're bringing back those stories. In fact, they're putting them as though it has just happened, when it has happened years ago. What all that is in aid of what? None of that troubles me, but there are people who are interested in
that narrative,
in that kind of a narrative. Sometimes for partisan political advantage within national borders. Sometimes for self-interest, But Teresa, one of the good things about the life that I have lived and my involvement, I've been a political activist for 55 years this year. I've been Prime Minister now for nearly 23 years. I have been a student of political economy for a long, long time. Next year, June, will be 50 years. In 6-7 months' time, it will be 50 years since I got my PhD. I've written a lot. I've studied a lot. I have taught students at different universities, been a member of the staff of different universities, lecturer, visiting professor, and the like.
All of which will hold you in good stead.
And all of these things I can't stand by and watch a deterioration of relations between two countries in Latin America and the Caribbean. Venezuela is a Caribbean country too. It's washed by the Caribbean Sea. Guyana is part of CARICOM. Both of them are part of CELAC. And I know that the villages in my constituency would be affected negatively if this matter gets out of hand. People will be hurt. And the countries would be hurt. People flee conflicts, you know. Where are they going to go? They have to come up the islands for both Venezuela and Guyana. Innocent people lose their lives. We see what is happening in Gaza. We see what is happening in several parts of Africa, in the Ukraine. A strenuous life in pursuit of peace and international law is preferable to a life of ignoble ease in quest, in pursuit of perpetual conflict or even a violent endeavor.
That's a perfect end to this evening's edition of Roundtable Talk. Thank you very much, Prime Minister, for taking the time, and all the best in tomorrow's
Thank you. Thank you very much.
A facilitator. All the best, and thank you.
Thank you very much.
Until next Wednesday, do enjoy the rest of your Wednesday evening. So long.
You can increase your chances of winning the Super 6 jackpot with a combo play. Remember, Super 6 numbers are from 1 to 28. Choose any 5 Super 6 numbers. That's a combo 5 for $69. Match any 5 of the 6 numbers and you will win the jackpot. Choose 7 Super 6 numbers for $20.